Thanks for coming, everyone. It's so nice to have a turnout and faces and people. It's the most we've had in a couple months, so I appreciate you guys coming. So we're going to be here for a couple hours, as you guys know. I think anyone new? You're new. Yeah, you're not new to my work. No. Everyone else has been here before. Okay. For those of you who are out there on YouTube land, if you're new to me and us, we're with the Flower of Life Center for Human Evolution, and we are a volunteer organization focused on raising human consciousness, which isn't that a really important thing right now on the planet, and that manifests for us in many ways. So I want to start today just by talking a little bit about some of the messages that have been coming in, like I always do, catch everybody up, and let's do this free form. So if anyone in the room has any questions or things they want to share or discuss, let's just go ahead and interject. We'll have the mic too, so you guys can grab the mic, because it's a pretty interesting time. We're all unique in how we are navigating this time, and I think that's so important to consider when we're dealing with so many different situations in our lives, family, commerce, spirituality, all of that stuff. Last month, if you were here, I focused on the non-physical aspects of what's going on the planet, which I think are incredibly important, and I've come to a really complex understanding of, which I'll kind of touch into a little bit, because I still think it's important to keep that on track and to understand what we're navigating vibrationally. But shortly after that event, I had a series of visitations from various guides who were talking a lot about physical, which is just as important as navigating non-physical. And so that's where I want to spend most of the time today focused on, because let's face it, physical is pretty difficult to deal with right now, depending on where you are. We were just chatting about that. Little pockets of consciousness and geographic regions around the world are just facing this differently. So we're all exactly where we're meant to be right now. But I want to back up and talk about why I think we're here. And we all know we're here to ascend as souls. And that's a never-ending process, journey that we're on. And if we didn't want to do that, we wouldn't have come. Point blank. Like, if we didn't want to have a physical experience and we didn't want to keep growing and changing, we wouldn't be here in this form on the earth. You know, we would have taken another position on a high council as part of a collective, and we have. Like, all of us who are here, we're focused in this reality, but there are parts of us in other realities that are doing other things. Some of that is in the form of light, and that's just as important as what we're doing here. No better, no worse, really. It's just a judgment. But the process of ascension relies upon one very important thing, and that is constant movement and constant change. So to have an event like this, we first have to consider that we are changing within vibrationally every day, every moment, right? Even to the degree where, the guides will come in and we'll ask them to make a prediction. Okay, like, when's this going to end? When am I going to find the love of my life? And they can look at your energy field and say, well, the highest potential you have right now looks like it could manifest in 2 weeks. But it's only as good as you make decisions tomorrow, and your thoughts and how you feel, because everything's in constant motion. And it's important to know that, because we get really stuck on forcing outcomes by trying to align vibrations. And although I think vibrational alignment is so important, and I'm actually launching a course on that on Monday, because the guides obviously think it's important too, we also have to make sure that what we are vibrationally aligned with matches how we show up in physical. So the DNA is something I want to talk about in relationship to this, because I know a lot of us here and who are out there have focused a lot on activating our DNA and are focused on crystalline DNA and crystallizing ourselves. And I think that's a very important process. And there's a lot of spiritual practice that we can do to focus on our DNA. But we wouldn't have crystalline and carbon DNA if we weren't meant to also converge both aspects of what those contain, which is I consider a storage bank or a holding container for our physical and non-physical experiences, right? So the DNA is ordered. I believe it's ordered in dimensional and timeline realities, meaning everything that we create in one dimension is stored within a DNA strand. And then we draw to match that through our crystalline double. So the carbon-based strand's very earthly, very physically focused. The crystalline strands we know are more universal or cosmic. So the important thing to note here is we can do a lot of spiritual work and we can crystallize a lot of DNA strands and we can be really multidimensional. But unless we converge that somewhere at some point in our physical reality, it really doesn't move us forward as a human or as a collective. So these events that are taking place simultaneously, because I don't see this as one event. I mean, we all know if we look at what's happening on the planet, we have a myriad of little themed, experiences going on consecutively. I mean, let's face it, it hits all areas of our life. That's how massive it is. This is a massive upgrade. I mean, we are all meant to change that much through this experience that it's affecting every single area of our life. But as a conduit for changing the collective, we all have a very unique signature that energy is flowing through and that we are perceiving through. And that's really important to consider. So we're all at varying speeds. We're all at different levels of consciousness. We all have different preferences, for example, and that's very purposeful, right? So I see this as a timeline collision. And I've explained this before. I think that we are meant to revisit periods of history, and that's very important for our ascension. Because if we didn't revisit history with new eyes or a new consciousness or a different vision, we would be stuck in the same reality consecutively. And so an example of this is like in a relationship, right? We can be in a relationship and maybe we know it's really not the best relationship for us. But we blame this other person for it being the way that it is, and we're so miserable because they can't change, and there's something they did to us in the past that betrayed our trust, and we keep dwelling on that past so much that we stay there. We never move forward. And maybe there's some things in our way, like fear of losing that person or resources or comfort or hurting people or whatever it may be, that doesn't allow us to move past it either. So now what's happening is we're living in the same reality, the same history every single day. We don't change non-physically or physically. Let's take that a step back. We may have the conscious notion or understanding that we're different and that the relationship isn't serving us the way that it should. But unless we are willing to navigate those changes in physical, we don't have the aligned vibration to bring in the support that we're meant to have that navigates us in any challenge, okay, on the planet. So everything that's going on in our timelines and how we respond to that consciously has the ability to draw from the source field around us everything that we need to support those actions that we have to take or inspire us to make decisions that are best for everyone. And the guides are really quick to say that decision making, okay, or desire doesn't come from nothingness. Like we like to blame our decisions, or we have these desires that are selfish, or we could never do that because that's too big, or whatever that may be. And the guides say that's just confirmation of what you've already created. So when you have a desire, or when you have an idea, or you think you need to make a decision, it's usually recognizing some new energetic template that you formed in non-physical that already exists. And that means if it exists, it's sourcing, right? So every timeline that we create, regardless of how we choose to change it or stay on it or leave it, is sourcing and continuing on. This is kind of a hard concept that I want to weave in, but it makes a lot of sense in regards to what's happening on the planet. Take Atlantis, for example. Atlantis happened here. We know the story. A lot of channels bring in information about Atlantis. We've read all the books. But Atlantis continues on. It just doesn't exist in this dimension anymore. So that means that the history of Atlantis is actually changing beyond what we know, which is kind of wild to think about, right? Because it puts the whole concept of truth in a new perspective. It's not stagnant. It could never be stagnant. Everything's constantly changing. We're constantly changing. The guides, even in my book, went so far as to say that people will judge certain channels for bringing in information from the Pleiadians that conflicts what another channel would bring in. But to judge that, it could never be right or wrong, because the Pleiadians are multidimensional and they're living in all these different timelines with all these different activities. It's like massive, right? I mean, that's how we operate too. We just filter it through physical. So everything that we interact with is constantly changing. Truths are constantly changing. And to have to revisit history with such a fast-paced movement and change that's happening on the planet right now isn't easy to navigate. But the only navigation tools we have at our disposal are what we intuit and what we believe, which could never look like anyone else and couldn't really be validated in statistics or how other people are responding. It's kind of like those multidimensional timelines that run on and on that are so massive. This is who we are as a race as well. So a timeline event like this, where we have multiple situations going on in a massive worldwide experience, is being met even more massively by every single human that's intertwined in it, right? And that's pretty incredible to think about. So we often get stuck in the right and wrong and the judging of, but what's truly happening is a mix. It's like an orchestration of everybody meeting history exactly where they need to and how they need to continue to move us forward. So back to the DNA. We have this incredible ability when we ascend or we awaken to draw knowledge. And so many of us do that, I mean, constantly. And I'm one of them, I'm always like, what's this? What's that? Reading new things, it's really good for us to find those sources in physical that match what we're spiritually drawing. But if we never implement it in some way, the crystalline strand that brought it in, that we may have activated through meditation or some really cool process or went to a vortex or a portal, never integrates with the physical strand where our physical dimension is. So we could have 7 strands of crystalline DNA and we could be astral traveling and channeling and healing and doing all these cool things, but our physical lives aren't moving forward. And we find ourselves immersed in a historic situation that we've lived before over and over again. So how do you make decisions that are aligned with what you know in a really restrictive energy? And this is what the guides are bringing in when I just channeled my Inner Circle video the other day, because it's really tricky and I think it's really personal right now. And again, we can't fault anybody for where they are. We have been for such a very long time, we have been so forced outside of our inner guidance. We've had to conform in certain situations in order to receive certain things, or we know this, I don't even have to go through it, right? There's a structure that we've built all around the way society operated in the third dimension. And that structure right now exists outside of us as well. It's kind of like the platform that holds us up. So you're back in that relationship, you shouldn't be there, things aren't going well, it doesn't really match who you've become, and you start to take conscious steps forward. I don't know what that is. Maybe it's talking to your spouse in a way you've never considered before, letting some things out of the vault that you were suppressing before, going to counseling. I'm not sure what that means for you. But the second you start stepping outside of the box from the pattern, you can never see history the way you did before. And that's what's so cool about where we're going. Everyone talks about time moving so quickly. We're starting to operate in quantum time. And quantum time doesn't rely on these really lengthy processes and figuring out and physical and taking the steps. And that's usually the stuff that we get wound around when we think about stepping outside of the box is, oh, this is going to happen and this could happen. And there's a bunch of consequences that might show up for me, or I'm going to hurt somebody, I'm going to hurt myself. This has not served us. And that's where quantum time steps in to say the second you take action that's aligned with what you believe, it's like the placebo effect in physical that we know works so well with our health. You know, when we're that aligned in action, it doesn't matter what the consequences are, what the perceived outcomes are that we've held on to for so long that have been third dimensional. We literally clear the way. You know, we literally clear the way. Like we were just talking in the room about a retreat and traveling to a retreat and how there's just so much going on in the field about checkpoints and getting stopped and all these, you know, roadblocks and things. But when you're aligned with where you're going, the universe kind of clears this path, right? And that's how it was shown to me. It's like moving everything aside so that the consequences aren't really there. And if there's a consequence you're meant to experience, it's probably because you're here in some way to address it for the rest of the collective, someone in your family. You know, there's consequences and challenges we're always going to face in our life because they're how we up-level. But if we're constantly using those as the stopping point for moving forward, we're never going to integrate those DNA strands. And that's really where we land a new dimension. So the guys are showing me we have a lot of, you know, we have a good majority of people on the planet, perhaps, that are walking physical steps and taking physical actions that aren't truly in alignment with what they believe. And when that happens, the universe kind of steps in, right? And that's, I think, again, the crux vibrationally of this entire event. It's not just historic and revisiting history, but that we haven't been fully embodied in what we know. You know, there's been a lot of awakening, there's been a lot of non-physical movement and change. And now the universe is stepping in to say, let's start walking in that new path, which is completely unknown and often uncomfortable. But we've seen this happen in our personal lives, haven't we? You know, I certainly have. The second I started walking this path, my entire life imploded. And I was holding on so tight to everything. And it was in every single area of my life. It was relationships. It was financial. It was my home. It was my family. I mean, everything had to change. And even when I got to the point where I thought nothing else could possibly change, I went through the whole thing. Stuff was still crumbling away. And that is the perfect example of the universal process I think we're in right now, is that we just became the people who didn't fit in the old model. You know, that old structure, it doesn't work for us anymore, but there's a lot of safety nets there. And there's a lot of comfort there. And sometimes when we think about moving outside of our comfort zone, there are consequences and there are risks that we have to take. And then we think that maybe we're going to lose things from our life or we're not going to be supported. But I can tell you personally that I was so incredibly supported. I'm in complete and total awe and humbled by what the universe offered me and still offers me for walking this path. And that's what I want for everyone in this situation. And it doesn't have to look like me or anyone else out there, right? And there can be people who are completely aligned vibrationally and taking steps in physical that you don't agree with. But that's okay. All that matters is we're all authentically doing that, because if we're not, we're upholding an old structure. We're kind of keeping it alive when it's ready to disintegrate. And it wants to disintegrate to make space for that template that exists, right? Maybe it's the new relationship, I don't know, that we've already created that wants to come in and ground, because it can't unless there's space. So I think in every area of our life, we're being challenged right now to make space for physical action, even in very restrictive circumstances. I can tell you what that looks like for me, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form saying that you should do what I do. I'm very alternative and very far to one side. And what I live and what I do is not for everybody. But, you know, the guides kind of pushed me in this direction a couple of weeks ago to say, let's bring some examples about how you're aligned with very difficult situations. Not to pat myself on the back, because I don't know it all. Believe me, I still make a lot of mistakes. But you know, I just don't believe that a mask is in my best interest. I don't believe it's keeping anyone safe from me. I don't feel like it's keeping me safe. And it's a very uncomfortable thing for me to subscribe to with my current beliefs. So when I put myself in a situation where I have to wear one because they are mandated, there's a feeling inside of me that doesn't jive. And it has nothing to do with anyone out there and what they believe, but it has to do with letting myself down. And I feel like I've worked so hard, and I know so many people in this community have worked so hard on their nervous systems and their resilience. You know, our empathy and our telepathy is so incredibly strong. I mean, we're feeling that from everybody. So I need to be at my personal best and my strongest during a situation on the planet that is really difficult to navigate. And that means I have to make some difficult choices. So at first I tried to show up without the mask in places where I was meant to wear one. And you know, I had the conversations with the store managers, and actually, surprisingly, they went very well. And I was never denied access. But the resounding response to that from those around me was not an easy thing as an empath and a sensitive to deal with. And again, I felt, okay, this is letting myself down. I need to be at my strongest and most resilient place to be of service to myself first, right? And to others. So I've carved out a new way of getting what I need, you know? I've found the stores where I don't feel that way. And the ones that I do, I'm just ordering online, you know? And it doesn't feel restrictive to me to not go there anymore. It's better for me to actually uphold my truths and beliefs because that is all I have right now, right? I mean, really, when we think about it, what we believe in and who we are is the crux of everything. It's all we have. And what source energy does is when you stand in your belief and you take actions in alignment, it's going to open the field for more, right? Because that's what I've learned in preparing for this course that I'm embarking on with all of you this Monday is sometimes we distort the signal to source. Sometimes we repress our emotions, even though we know there's something that's not right. Or sometimes we're not willing to take the physical step outside of bounds because of safety. And so what source energy recognizes is that we want more of the same, because that's where we lie. We lie in this area, right? This very restrictive area. So we can do all of the work in non-physical, and I'm a big proponent of that, obviously. Meditating and visualizing and all of that stuff I think is so important. But if our physical actions don't align with what we're putting out there energetically and who we become and what we believe, we're just as stalled as we were before all of this awakening took place. So I say that with the utmost love and respect and kindness, knowing we are all unique souls with unique situations, bodies, families. So that's I think it's really important, and that's what we're going to talk about. A lot of divine feminine energies coming in for this course, if you're with me on Monday, to help us navigate this path. Because I don't think it's just for us. You know, when we do that, it has a ripple effect on the entire collective. So really it matters not what your beliefs are, as long as you're solidly standing in them, to allow that to transition to take place for everyone, you know, in the best way possible. And I just want to make one more point, and then we can channel and we can talk about whatever you guys want to discuss. And this is another tough one, you know, for me to bring out. And I've been editing my book. And again, like I want to say this first, because it hit me with a massive wave this morning. I'm just so humbled by divine time. I mean, I could literally cry right now. what our minds want to do and try to control is so ridiculous compared to what the universe knows. And I mentioned before I started, I channeled this book in 2015 through 2017. I've been constantly like, oh, you're not doing enough. You're not getting it out. You're failing. The universe put so many roadblocks in my way. I sent it to an editor. It was a massive fail. Like I had to redo it, the whole thing myself. And I thought, man, this is never going to happen. But now that I'm reading it, and what I could have never imagined back in 2015 that it would come out now, and it's so perfect for what is happening right now. So I just wanted to mention that if there's something like that in your life where you're trying to force it and it's not moving along, trust the universe implicitly, because divine time is always at play. Always, always at play. So there's this interesting chapter in my book about, well, first I'll back up to say a lot of the common theme and threads in my book have to do with reptilian consciousness, which I talk about a lot. And I know that a lot of you out there know what that is. And it's really defined in detail, okay, in the book. But we have a lot of finger pointing going on. And I'm not going to lie, I like to point fingers too. I know who all the bad guys are, and I like to keep track of them and, get really mad, right? I mean, we got a lot of bad guys. We did a lot of stuff. However, what's interesting to note in this, this goes back to reptilian consciousness, is, it is within us, which is such a hard thing to accept, that there are people on our planet carrying out themes that we might be contributing to in unique ways. But we are truly the ones who keep reptilian consciousness alive. It is separation, right? It is judgment. It's a lot of things. Well, I want to talk about the government for a minute. Because, there's a lot of us in this community, and, I think I've channeled on this as well about reptilian consciousness and government. And we can see, right, there's a lot of decisions being made at that level that aren't in our highest and best interest. But we often think there's this grand scheme or this grand plan, and we can sure conjure up a lot of facts that support this grand scheme and grand plan. But there are also a lot of people who have been immersed in government in certain positions, elected or otherwise, who are so overwhelmed by this consciousness that they don't even realize what's happening or what they're doing, right? And it's like the higher theme of this is unconsciousness. We have a group of people that come together and they're immersed in something. The book suggested that they give a lot of their power away. So here we are in a situation where we feel our power, our freedoms are being taken away by people who are, we think, more powerful, when in fact, they're actually very weakened in their energy fields. So what's going on at the government level is actually a massive orchestration of unconsciousness and turning on of inactive genes and not having the ability to run energy through the emotional body, but only through the mind. And that changes the people that are involved in those positions. And it's across the board. It's not just the people that we're pointing fingers at. It's a lot of people behind them and underneath them. So that seems pretty defeating when I talk about it. But what we're going to be witnessing on our planet is how that structure is becoming dismantled, meaning reptilian consciousness right now might be perceived in abundance because it's meant to clear. And I brought this message in, maybe it was last time or the time before, if you were with me for Soul Alchemy. A lot of people are literally seeing dark energies, right? Reptilian energies purging. Are we under attack? Oh boy. I knew I shouldn't have talked about this on live. Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm not afraid. It's okay. So soul alchemy is taking place, which has a lot to do with the DNA, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through that. But we're literally in a process of clearing that from the planet. So we are seeing it, we're witnessing it in abundance, because we have to meet everything exactly where it is, right? That's how, consciousness meets unconsciousness, third dimension meets fourth dimension, awakened meets unawakened. There's a meeting point for everything. But if we continue to wrap ourselves in that process, we're going to find ourselves strengthening the consciousness that we don't want present. And I say this with complete respect, because I do think it's good to share information. I think there are people out there who are meant to expose certain things and awaken people to certain things on our planet. But sometimes we all take it upon ourselves to be that person, and we aren't always conscious in how we do it. And so now all of a sudden we have what I described at the last event, a frequency field, where we're so immersed in something we don't want to continue that we are actually adding to it energetically. And it's going to be harder and harder to navigate that situation because it is dismantling. So take an example like this. We have different governors in different states saying different things. Some of them seem completely insane. Sometimes it seems pretty logical. Like, how do we even balance that? Or, you know what I'm saying? And it switches, right? So then the logical guy says something completely out of bounds. And all of a sudden, we have something new and a new requirement. So this is what reptilian consciousness is going to go through in order to purge, right? It's like a crazy unwinding. And if we wind ourselves into the unwinding, we're going to find ourselves more taken down, I think, in our vibration than where we should be. And this exit point that I've discussed in physical, where we take these little, and it doesn't take much, right? You just make those little decisions. Ethan always says it brilliantly, the path of least resistance. I love that. The path of least resistance, wherever you feel most comfortable. The guides in the message I brought forward yesterday that I recorded for everyone said, always focus on comfort and peace. Where do you find comfort and peace? Because comfort and peace is the way. And comfort and peace doesn't exist in all that and trying to figure that out. And what am I going to do over here? Comfort and peace is where our freedom lies. So if we find that in little individual ways and we're anchoring that, then we let go of a very complex structure and matrix that's crumbling and going to be harder and harder to conform with and deal with. And we find our exit point into a new hologram or the fifth dimension. And I truly think that's what's required right now, for all of us. I'll leave you with this, and then I'll see if you guys have questions, and then we can channel. The theme of the message I brought in yesterday was anchoring light. And that's exactly what I've been trying to relay today, the whole concept of anchoring light. Anchor is our physical experience. We anchor somewhere for a while, and then, the light, we let go of that anchor sometimes and we float and navigate to a new location, and then we anchor again. We go in these waves or patterns where we vibrationally ascend and then we physically move forward, and then we vibrationally change and then we physically move forward. So we're all here anchoring the light in that way. And if we can keep ourselves aligned with our personal truths, we're going to find anchoring that light a pretty easy thing to do in a very difficult situation. So, questions, any comments, things I can touch on? Okay. All right. So we'll do a channeling now. You guys who are here know the routine, and most of you guys out there know the routine. We'll just have anyone who comes in give us the highest and best message for today that we need to know. And I, of course, take questions. So we're online, Ethan? Okay, so we'll take questions out there too. So if you have questions, you can post them in the chat, and we will take those. And we'll always prioritize you folks in the room, and we'll just flow with this and see where it takes us. I always will let you know who's here and who's speaking. And I know you guys all know this is a vibrational process. So if the words get too elusive or it feels like it's too hard mentally to stay up with, just sit in the energies and allow them to come in. All right. We're going to work with the Council of Light today. I welcome them as they step forward. We are the Council of Light. We are a collective that is 12th dimensional. Many of us exist in multiple star systems, and some of us are hybridized in multiple forms, yet we hold a very similar intention, and that is to reinstall the original design of what we have observed in the universe. It is an etheric connection that runs between all of us, not unlike your own human hearts, to share and amplify potentials between all beings in all races and all star systems. Much of what we observe is energetic in nature. And this is not because we are not interested in your physical decisions, but often by the time those decisions are made, the patterns have already been evident. And for quite some time, you've been reinforcing the patterns that lie within your non-physical fields. And they now become concrete and grounded potentials for you that you are willing participants in playing out. We give this analogy because it's important for us to discuss the energetic patterns that we see running on your planet today. Although, of course, seemingly very complex in nature, we can succinctly define them in different aspects of human living to help you draw conclusions about your safety and also your ability to override very difficult and challenging circumstances with what you've already put into motion and into your vault of potentials that we see within the collective design. We wish to start by looking at the more business-related aspects of your planet, knowing, of course, that this is a sideline to what is going on in your bodies. It is a significant one to discuss because it is where many of you are beginning to focus your attention. And we have mentioned in previous transmissions that much of what you've built in material came coded or imprinted with a specific consciousness. Every structure that exists, corporate, for example, or otherwise, is holding itself together by consciousness. And we want to explain that how you perceive as humans is a gateway to bring together light into physical form. You may not perceive it this way, but those of you who have efforted in physical to bring forth the manifestation of some physical creation understand that that effort came at the hands of your physical body. But there's always been an underlying energy that's been driving you forward in that endeavor. And that underlying energy is the most prudent part to understand when you look at business in general. Much of what's been happening in this energy is very fast-paced change. What you are used to in terms of business or interaction with businesses, or as an employee or an owner of a business, is now changing at the speed of light. Imagine the light that formed it actually taking a new shape. This is what we see when we look at your planet. It is not that you've been restricted to operate in a certain way. It is that the way you are operating no longer matches your consciousness. So what begins to happen is new patterns are born of light, and then the material that exists holding those light structures together has to conform and become something new. So while you look at the business model of a variety of different corporations, for example, and areas of commerce on your planet as being weakened in their state, we actually perceive them as going through an alchemy, a time of integration and change where the creativity and the minds of humans are preparing to launch a new way of interacting. And this is very important because, not unlike that physical decision that started to create the business originally, you are being reborn again, or the business itself, the corporation itself, is being reborn again in a new state. But we bring this to your attention because there are several paths to take when you are forced with recreating yourself. You may look at the more restrictive path and the outer reflections of what you must conform to in how it will be created. Or you can perceive this as an opportunity to recreate yourself to become the solution for some problem that has emerged in a very integrative and immersive change. And this is where the multiple potentials truly exist. So to be a multidimensional being allows you the opportunity to reconfigure material in different dimensions and interact with humans in whatever way you choose that benefits the consciousness you have now attained. And we'll take a step from there and go into schooling. As we know, this is also a very prevalent focus, which has quickly changed for many of you on the planet. What you have been unable to see in the restrictions of freedoms embedded within your platforms for teaching are now being revealed in mass. And the reason for this is that humans who were not aware of what their children were being taught are now coming face to face with it due to circumstances that are requiring that amount of attention. In addition, we believe that not only children but adults and how they have been taught in the past is coming to pass, meaning all of the belief systems that have been anchored in the third dimension are now being challenged to some degree. But you cannot challenge a belief system that exists within some physical network without the physicality of it coming to question. And all of the vibrational components of it realigning in some way to a new potential. So not unlike the previous example of commerce or business, we allude to what's going on within your education system as being very similar. There are already new structures that have been put in place, both physically and conceptually, that want to come in and replace the ones that no longer suit your consciousness. But it is the interaction with what was in a new way that requires that process to unfold. So where you are in the moment is exactly where you are meant to be, interacting with something that is forcing you to change your relationship to learning. For many of you who are still immersed in it, as well as your children and family members, communities who are also subject to it. Now we'll take it a step further and go into financial. Of course, this is one of the significant outcomes of the physical body focus that you have had. Again, a sideline perhaps to what that focus has been, but nonetheless setting off a chain of events that was always meant to take place. Your financial currencies and the way they have been distributed exist in a hierarchical and third dimensional structure that can no longer sustain itself in the vibration that you have attained. And because of this, you are now meeting some of the most difficult and challenging aspects of your financial structures in the moment with creative outlets and new ideas. Now, not all of you are meant to bring those creative ideas to light, but nonetheless are going through the alchemy in your personal lives of how you receive financial abundance, because the pathways to source energy are also changing. There are a variety of conditions, false and otherwise, that you have put in the way of receiving abundance. And as these conditions have been met with new beliefs and also have been challenged by a higher consciousness, they, not unlike the old third dimensional structure and timeline, need to crumble. They have become very unstable. Many of you have gone through very similar circumstances in your personal lives. You've upgraded your consciousness, and the flow of energy or currency that came in before no longer makes sense because it's imprinted in a lower weight or holds some condition that is no longer applicable to who you have become. Who you are becoming as enlightened citizens within the human race is paving the way for a freer currency system and an easier way to source. But we know there's often a lag time that you exist within, where those physical manifestations are becoming accessible to you. We know that it is very uncomfortable to be between different timelines and dimensions. But the faith and trust that you have in yourself and in all of humanity accentuates the process. Where you have lost faith, you are anchoring that loss of faith in concrete potentials that you don't wish to match. We know that source energy is good, and it is always providing exactly what it is needed when you are aligned with it in the most conscious way possible, not allowing yourself to be conditioned into some restrictive or unworthy representation of who you truly are. And this is what we see you working out on the planet right now. It's an ability to source for your truth, not for what you do. Your physical health is something that we want to save for last because it is an important message that we wish to bring forward. So we'll bring in government as a structure and help you to understand that what you're seeing in physical is only a reflection of old fragments of yourselves, soul pieces that no longer resonate with who you are, taking up a mirror reflection to show you the path that you are now changing, to show you that you're taking a path that is different from who you have been before. Sometimes the parts of us that are clearing become so aggravated because they were so comfortable to us for so long. We know they aren't who we are, and we know it's important to let them go. But we mourn for a little while because the path ahead is so unknown. Well, we see your government agencies, those who have been elected to certain positions, officials, in all areas of government and structure, holding a candle to the rebirth that you are now underway, or that is now underway within you. That candle is like a service of sorts. When we are mourning something, we are more apt to hold on in resistance. And this is what we see as expressing vibrationally through your entire collective. It's a mourning process in the midst of a resurrection and a transition back to wholeness or source. But there's always a part of you, or there's always someone who is left behind that carries the weight or the burden of that transition, who isn't ready to let it go or to see it pass. So have comfort and feel into empathically, even though it is very difficult for you at times. The souls that are immersed in the decisions you most desire not to see, because they are struggling just as much as you to uphold something that is dying. And as it does, they will have to take new positions themselves. Their entire lives will be rearranged and realigned. And there is an immediate feeling of that cannot be denied. So we'll leave you with this, and we are going to focus on the human body last. Everything that goes on within your bodies is a recycling of energy. Any viral component of a physical experience is a detoxification of some discordant pattern that is seen as threatening. Your bodies are recognizing a variety of patterns and toxins and communication that is no longer matching who you've become. So this purging process, although very physically focused and can be traced back to some malevolent events, was always meant to happen so that even the light that exists in your bodies could become new. Those that have struggled with an instance of disease, especially in relationship to the global pattern that we see playing out, are the ones that knew they had the vibration to carry it for others, who didn't necessarily have the experience of it in their divine plan in the same exact way. It isn't karmic necessarily, so much as it is an alchemy or a transition that many of you are going through. But just as the placebo effect was brought into this communication prior to our entry, we must say that there has been a distinct activation through belief of what this process truly is. And not unlike any reinforcing of a physical potential, you will ground it as you align to it and match it in your vibration. The physical body is processing so much light right now that many of you are experiencing it as disease that doesn't even relate to the pattern you see in mass. It is one of the most important transitions that you will walk as a human collective, but it was never meant for you to suffer. The micro-biotic collectives in Earth are becoming purified and accentuated through the Schumann resonance. And other planets and stars that Earth is now coming closer in contact with that have beneficial vibrations to share. Her DNA and Akashic records are both changing. And all of that surges through her because you are a part of it individually and collectively. So the Dolphins and Whales step in and say, it is our intention to share an activation with you today to support and realign at the cellular level any belief of what is happening today, that you may be impacted by what is taking place in the body, negatively or otherwise, and to align your microbiotics in their original state, their original form, a harmonic that is love-based and that carries you into an accentuation of your longevity and health, which needed to be a part of this transition so that you could move into the fifth dimension with more comfort and more vitality. And as the Dolphins and Whales step in, they say, we're so welcome to be here. And we are present within the waters of Gaia and focus upon the waters within you as a conduit for moving energy, for recycling it, and for raising it. And as you breathe with us, imagine yourself floating in those crystalline waters of Sophia. They are at the exact temperature of your body, not too warm and not too cool. Completely perfect and comfortable. The buoyancy of your body carries it in whatever direction it must go, aligning it with ley lines and meridians that run through Gaia's core, beneath the oceans and waters. And they coincide and connect with your own meridians and ley lines within, very specifically and uniquely. There is no efforting at this. As you allow yourself to float with the breath, you find yourself in the perfect galactic location where planets and stars, cosmic families, converge now and support this reconnection. As you are held safely within these buoyant waters, the water within you becomes more crystal and clear. It is made up of 1,000,000 fragments of light, all sparkling and glowing like the sun hitting the water just before dusk. And as you allow yourself to relax deeper, you let go of any resistance that you have in the body, of any fears that you have about physical, future manifestations or potentials. You are in full relaxation now, letting go of the need to control outcomes and letting go of the need to know. It is often the knowing that causes the most resistance. There's nothing to prove here. Any viruses or bacteria that exist in your body are unlike any other. You are not here to make them the same, and the same they could never be. All of the organisms in your body harmonize like an orchestra of many instruments tuning to your heart. And they find themselves into the perfect position, sacred geometrically, very organized and prioritized, to help you release anything that must go. At the same time, they raise up the original life force signature of your first newborn breath. And as that life force signature surges through all of your cells, through the meridians and channels of your body, it reinstalls you to a state of complete coherence and purity. All of the areas that were mentioned in this transmission, financial, education, business, and health, as they are changing in your personal reality, your body finds comfort with those changes. Your mind relaxes and allows the higher self to guide you. And your intuition becomes stronger, known and accepted by you and validated in the outer world. And as you take a very deep cleansing breath, the etheric cord that runs through your root and wraps all the way around the mother womb of Gaia herself anchors this energy, sealing and healing this practice. And we're very pleased to take questions.
Thank you for being here. You were asking or commenting on our financial system, and I have heard twice in the last month that the Trump administration has taken control of the Federal Reserve, and I'm wanting to know, is that true? And if so, what are going to be the ramifications of that?
Yes, we are the Pleiadians. And we first wish to allude to the fact that there are many distortions that are taking place in physical that are designed to move you outside of the realm of your personal evolution. And we say this with compassion, knowing that there are so many of you who understand this agency to be a very malevolent part of your human experience. We look at your president not as carrying out the decisions that are in your best interest, but as a guidepost for how human consciousness is changing. And what is interesting about this to us is that this man is often looked at in different polarities. Some are perceiving him as the highest vibrational light that is preparing and paving the way for the next leg of your journey, while others are looking at him as stalling human progress. This is evident within a very great division that we see in consciousness taking place within your race. That being said, it's important for us to answer this question because we do see instabilities that are currently going on within this agency and many others. But it stems not from a decision within your government so much as it does with your disbelief and mistrust in it. Now, we're going to take this from a very high vibrational level and bring it down to a physical message so that you can understand what we see as the expectation for this timeline. And we have to reinforce that this agency itself was also a manifestation of your consciousness. Any power that was given away to a source outside of you created a power structure. But now what's happening is you are taking your power back. And in reclaiming that power, these false matrices are becoming unstable. But they are a consciousness, and they are made up of humans. So not unlike yourself, when instabilities exist within, things are magnetized to your experience to find balance again. It isn't often the most comfortable experience that you have of that change, but collective forms of consciousness with multiple humans experience it as well. This is interesting to note. Many government agencies such as this have drawn a group of humans that are playing out their scenarios that have a similar record, meaning they are coded in their personal experience to hit roadblocks and challenges. We see many of the individuals at this level embarking upon one of the most challenging experiences in their soul's journey. What is happening is they're magnetizing a lot of resistance from the outer world and revealing of secrets and things that have been held from the public because it is in their timeline record to have that happen. So you are co-creating an event here that is manifesting in the implosion of some structure that was upheld through your consciousness. Although we have to also consider physical, we know that it's important to bridge the two. So every decision that you're making as a human is either contributing to the outcome you desire or is strengthening the potential of something that you do not wish to experience. You are co-creating together, meaning that your decisions and how you interact with this agency has everything to do with its further deconstruction or strengthening if you so choose. It is not one human that upholds the decision for some massive amount of energy to change, because it would be impossible for one person on your planet to create something that so many people interact with on a daily basis. So what we're stressing here is the need for every human to show up and to act within what they believe, although seemingly facing some consequence. Now, the consequence is where we want to transition into a more physically focused answer. We do see a time when humans are awakening in the next linear year and a half to more in-depth understanding of the falsehoods of consequence. Much of what your legal structure has been based on within government agencies is a false matrix of consequences for certain actions. And we're not speaking of laws that keep humans safe, for example, from physical abuse. There are varying levels of manifestations of different laws and structures, but we even see those having to go through an alchemy. Your disbelief in the consequence of the actions of interacting with this agency is going to outweigh the ability of the agency to inflict consequence. And when that happens, you'll begin to see a pivot in how these agencies that have been falsifying your personal worth through their gain begin to change and erode. We see this already happening at the non-physical level. A lot of instabilities that have been literally created through the human consciousness and mind. But this must continue to go in that direction in order to see the result that you desire.
Thank you. I hope this isn't off topic too much. A month ago, I rescued a pit bull pup. He had not a very nice owner, and I guess maybe the poor guy, he just had a bad start in his life. I had to put him down yesterday, and I found some humor. I was telling him to say hello to my dog Bear that had lived to be 14. So what is doggy heaven, or what dimension do our cats and dogs, our domestic friends that love us so much?
Yes, Archangel Gabriel. And we want to start by saying there is no difference in the soul of an animal or the soul of a human in regards to transition and the decisions that are made to reintegrate into the one. So although animals have a much different assignment and consciousness than humans on the planet, they still undergo at this juncture a very similar process to what many of you do. Now, when there's a connection between animals for a similar owner, you must understand that those animals will carry that identity with them through the transition. So it is not unlike family members. Although a soul fragments into different identities, those identities continue to go on regardless of the transition of a soul from a physical body. And this is why many of you who are very adept at speaking with souls who have passed on can identify the same characteristics and ways of speaking and feeling of those souls that etherically present messages to you from other dimensions. Pets are no different. So they will always find a meeting place with others that match the imprint of their identity from the earth. We see, for example, humans that you have lived with that you've most resonated with through time as ancient gatekeepers who will come back when you are preparing to transition. And the reason for this is there is a time in which your consciousness has difficulty adapting to its movement between physical and non-physical. And these recognizable identities in this linear timeline are best suited to help you move through that transition. So in dimensional relationship, it's hard for us to say that any one soul ends up and remains in any one dimension, but will continue to divide and reassign themselves elsewhere, even though a part of them lives on. So we want to answer this question in a way that suits you, but also take it a step further by saying that any two pets with the same owner having a similar imprint will of course be joined at the time of their transition and most likely live on together as souls in a timeline that never ends. At the same time, they're reintegrating into such a grand vision that they'll often refragment elsewhere. So if you've ever adopted a new pet, for example, and believed that a part of an old one was existent within the new, It certainly is possible because there is always a choice from souls that reintegrate to move into other timelines and dimensions. And pets are some of the most important soul guides for you on your journey. And when they transition, they have such a desire to often come back in a different form that they are the ones that most often do. When you transition and are integrated with the One, you are in a process of review. Not like what review on your planet is defined to be, because it is through collective eyes that you are seeing every decision simultaneously. There are great themes that come in that are assembled by you and are picked up as very valuable to focus on in other lifetimes and dimensions. And this is often why a soul will experience itself in a multitude of forms or even come back again to the earth, because there's something valuable, some insight that they received that they want to come back and reconfigure in some way. But we leave you with this. All of you on the planet at this juncture are going through a very similar transition. When you move through different dimensions, the review of your life through new eyes is what brings you into a state of operating beyond your old identity and choosing a new one, choosing new relationships and new ways of creating. And that is constantly unfolding throughout the galactic universe.
I have a friend who reached out to me yesterday. His cousin took her life, and so he asked if I could help with her. I do have a gift and a process that can help even when people pass, and so I was able to connect with her. Her name was Laura, and in that process, she was able to help a sister back into source light consciousness again. And when she did, it was really precious, because she actually, her spirit was so high that she knew she is an angel, and that she chose to come here as an incarnate, as a human. This was actually her first experience as a human for this critical time. And in this interaction with my friend, she is an angel to him and helping him on his journey now for all the work he'll be doing. So he had asked a question with me actually today. He just never thought or believed that angels actually can incarnate here on earth. So we'd like to share more about that with their purpose here.
Yes, we bring in Divine Mother. The simple answer to this question is that all of you are angels incarnate. There is a part of you that embodies with your soul, that is the gatekeeper or guide for your journey, but is also precisely tuned to all others you will interact with in this lifetime. Angelic form takes many varieties, and this is perhaps what many of you are striving for in terms of heaven on earth, because an angel does not just reside in the heavens beyond earth, but can be present right now within your physical form and create that heaven to its liking. This is the realization that we want to install within all of humanity, that it is not to wait until the time of your passing for that grand intervention with God or One to see beyond what physical eyes do not allow. But also, in the pain of losing another human, there is a great opportunity to remember our angelic presence as well. Because although at the time a life is taken, there is great sorrow and especially trauma that comes up within the human soul, there's also an awakening process that is well underway. We see the transition of human souls on the planet, especially those who are most loved in your experience, as being planned not because they're meant to be karmic or for you to suffer, but that they coincide with a very significant opportunity for you to land this angelic presence in a body that you've never known before, or to become reacquainted with it in a way that you have never known. Souls who pass on from the earth, especially very abruptly in ways that are very difficult for us to accept, are ones who often exist in what we define as the angelic or etheric realm closest to Earth. And the reason for that is they have such great wisdom about what drove them to these decisions that they come back to mentor others who are in very similar situations upon the earth. And we don't take the deviation of a soul's journey in this respect lightly, because there are many spectrums for why or within which humans make these decisions. Some are orchestrated and pre-planned before arriving, and some are exit points where decisions are made, and a decision was made within, again, a spectrum of opportunities. So there is always a unique relationship to that angelic presence, we believe. It is never separate of the one that's left behind, nor is it only with the one who decides to transition. It is an opportunity for both souls or all immersed in the experience at hand.
I had a question. I'm hearing, because of the coronavirus, discussion about mandatory vaccination. And I guess over the years, I've heard lots of negative things about vaccinations and some of the intentions behind them, which I can't say that I know they're true or not true, but I just was wondering if you could speak, because I'm not sure that I feel safe with the vaccination, and of course I may not be safe without the vaccination as well. So can you
Yes.
shed a little light on that, please?
We can, and we're the Arcturian Collective, and we're very pleased to bring this transmission forward for all of those who are in a very similar situation, because we see a crossroads going on between your non-physical and physical experiences, especially where your consciousness has arrived and where your bodies are still holding some fear or resistance to the unknown. We want to speak to the history of what's happened with vaccines on your planet first. And we want to put it in a very similar light to the previous question about government agencies, because everything that exists in physical on your planet is a manifestation of your consciousness. Source energy is always responding to your physical needs, but it is matching exactly what your consciousness perceives. We will give this analogy first, and then we will relate it back to vaccines. As a human collective, you have manifested fast food restaurants. And this was because of a perceived lack of time. In your inability to accomplish as much as you desired, you wished for ways to cut corners. And in that desire, a new manifestation was born, where you could nourish yourself with a meal very quickly without having to prepare it. Now, if your consciousness would have also been aligned with longevity and health in the purest form, this manifestation would have looked quite differently than what it is today, or how it has shown up on the planet. And vaccines show up in the same light. It was a physically focused manifestation and model of what you believed was needed in order to keep yourselves healthy. But at the same time, we don't put it in a sense of judgment that you weren't smart enough to know what was best for you. You were responding to a myriad of outside teachings and beliefs, even some that were born within you and coded within your DNA from a past lineage of beliefs from your parents and generations before them. So if we look at a vaccine, we don't look at it as one thing. We actually see it as a manifestation of a myriad of desires coming together as one. A desire for monetary currency, a desire for health, a desire for safety. But there's also a common theme that relates to vaccines that we want to explain, not to sway you in any way, but to help you understand where you're headed as a human collective. In most areas of your Earth experience, even including your own bodies, there's been a hybridization away from purity and original state. genetics are a big focus for us and many of you in this area. Your genetics have been tampered with, and this has suppressed many of you from utilizing gifts and abilities and your entire technology in the way it was always designed. Much of this continues to go on today, and of course it is connected to a malevolent consciousness, reptilian in nature, that designs these different physical manifestations in concert with you, co-creates them by leading your mind into certain scenarios because it needs you to be in a weakened state. So much of what is out there that has caused you to believe that you need a vaccine to keep you safe was implanted and manipulated by a consciousness that also needs to stay safe. So safety is the overall issue that we must address and that we know you are concerned about in regards to this topic. Going back to the original message about government and their weakened position and attempting to hold on in resistance to something that is transitioning applies to what you're seeing take place on your planet. There are a variety of interactions and intentions that are focused at a vaccine model that continues to perpetuate that is not in your best interest. As a matter of fact, we think it matches much of what's gone on within Gaia's own soils as they've been hybridized away from their purest state. Now, when we look at a vaccine for a virus, for example, the notion that something outside of you is keeping you safe is a part of the evolution process that is underway in all areas. But for health and longevity to actually be present, it could never be subject to something outside of it, and especially not natural to the earth. Because you were designed to connect not only physically to everything that was seated here within nature, but also vibrationally. And this is what has been most disturbed. So we see vaccines causing a pattern within you that is a communication signaling the body in unnatural responses, which actually weakens it and makes you more susceptible to illness than what this proposed viral pandemic could ever create. Knowing that you have to make difficult decisions, especially in regards to work and family, it is always your choice in how you interact with things on your planet. We are always quick to mention that if you are to take a pharmaceutical drug, for example, you are the determining factor as to how those toxins interact with your structure. If you are in full belief that they are supporting and helping you, then they may take on the effect of nature in your physical body. We say this, but we have rarely ever seen it. The reason is that much faith and trust in something that comes from outside of you isn't natural to the human mind. So while you are walking a difficult transition, it is prudent to test the waters in all areas. But if you choose to walk the path of the vaccine, we suggest strengthening the overall body in all areas as well. Because unless your body can sustain its natural patterns and abilities, it cannot detoxify itself from the discordant or malevolent ones that are still being forced upon you. We believe that much of what's happening in this realm is going to come to pass as you walk the next several linear years into the 2020s. And the reason that we say this is it's no longer sustainable. There are a mass number of humans who do not believe that this is the path of highest health. But you've come to meet exactly what has been forced upon you with this new belief at a time on your planet when the physical embodiment of it is so necessary. So as this continues to play out, we see positive potentials aligning with you to walk a path of pure health beyond where it has been forced in more chemical frequencies.
Do you see them forcing us to get vaccinated?
Yes. Well, the Pleiadians come in. Now remember, in the previous example that we have given of a government agency that forces consequences that are false, what you will come to realize is that although there may be a mandatory law, the consequences perhaps of upholding that law on your planet may be just as false as the ones you perceive with the financial agencies that are deconstructing. Many on your planet, we notice, are taking the path of uncovering different legal ramifications and paths to ensure that mandatory vaccines are not able to take place. And although this will go on for quite some time, we don't see that actually being the path of it changing collectively on your planet. When humanity realizes that it is within their will and power to create their life however they so choose, much of what has been forced on them in mandates will go away, because it is only what is left over within you in terms of belief and restriction of power that's reinforcing mandates that you do not desire. We know this is difficult to hear because you believe that you're being forced to comply with something. But it is the compliance part of it that is very subjective, not unlike much of what you are seeing come through different government officials and representatives in different areas being very subject to interpretation. Much of these laws and mandates will also be perceived as up for interpretation, and it is up to all of you to uncover what your personal perception and interpretation is as well. There's no mistake that you may find yourself at a crossroads with making a decision between taking a mandatory vaccine, for example, and your livelihood. We know this is not an easy decision to make, but it is only reflective of all of the restrictions that you've put in your energy field that keep you separate of source. There seemingly is no safety net when we make a decision such as this, to not take a vaccine and to redirect ourselves on a different path. But this is where the universe works best. In your willingness to take a new path, the universe has already co-created and conspired with multiple resources in multiple timelines to bring currencies to you that you had not thought were possible. It is only the standing in the way of source energy that doesn't allow you to walk the path of ease and grace. And the Arcturians step in one more time to say, your physical bodies are now rejecting much of what these toxin-laden vaccines contain. So what we anticipate going into some of the beginnings of the mandates or forcing of these vaccines is such incredible reaction that it is going to be evident to many on your planet that this could never be the path for all. You have become far too sensitive as humans. You have completely reconfigured your crystalline structures. Many of you are so sensitive to foods that you've developed foreign allergies and things that really do not need to exist at this time. So imagine now a mass number of humans who have reached this high vibrational potential, who have not interacted with vaccines or toxins for a very long time, being forced to take one. We will begin to see many who are experiencing immediate consequences of that. Not detrimental to the degree that many would pass. This is not what we were saying. But it is the extra sensitivities that will play out very significantly on your planet and show patterns that many who have yet to awaken to these agendas would consider.
So I've received a a YouTube video from a friend speaking more about the New World Order and all of the really the organization that has been growing and ready to try and birth itself right now is showing its head, which all that we are seeing. And it was from Laura Eisenhower, which was beautiful. So she really expressed that because she was a part of the Illuminati and all of that work, and that she had awakened, and it was really beautiful because she, disconnected from all of her family, all of it, and now she's a spokesperson. So after listening to her talk, I resonated within myself and my guides and channels, and it brought me a picture of an experience that is all of our work here as light workers, to bring the energy and the love to all those like Laura Eisenhower, who actually are very unawakened and creating all of these things, but that will also awaken too. So I wanted to ask more about that as far as our role, so we can really move towards the solution of love, and in our way that's very real, that actually will be happening to change actually within all of that dark energy into their light.
Yes, we're the Pleiadians, and yes, we agree that love is the only way. Because what you are recognizing in what you call a new world order is only a high council gone awry. Because upon your earth, everything manifests collectively from your consciousness. And polarities of light and dark have become very skewed here, not in alignment with the original intention of preference or contrast. So we want to take you back to your origination point, where you were seated as humans, and remind you that you are seated in a variety of multi-galactic 12th dimensional races who were operating in a love-based frequency and in unity consciousness. That did not mean that you are not meant to experience some challenge or conflict as a soul upon the earth, because all of us in our star systems, even today, still have challenges and conflicts that we know are a part of our evolution. But there was a race that came to the earth that was in a very difficult position. And we want to use this as an analogy of what you see playing out at that level of the patriarchy, for example. When a race that has become so weakened in their ability to thrive or create begins to siphon energy for their own use or for power, you begin to recognize dark and light differently than what it was meant to be. Because now what's been created on the earth is similar to a war, even though it may not be recognized as such. And this was the beginning of the fall of your own technology and structure. What began to play out was a need to keep humans separate and single. Although you were always meant to be very separate and single of each other and uniquely crafted as light, you were always meant to hold a resonance, a collective focus in which what you were creating would serve all of humanity. But what began to take place over time was the siphoning of your creative energy and the direction into a very narrow scope of activity kept you more and more in the lower vibrations. You're meant to experience sadness at times. You're meant to experience trauma and loss, but you're never meant to stay there because you grow from those experiences. But humanity stayed in this state of lower vibration for a very long period of time. And what began to happen was that authentic resonance of love became very complicated. It became a resource, something outside of you that had to be understood or controlled or gained. And this is where the masculine and feminine within you became very imbalanced, because the ability to love or receive love became looked at through material resource or other humans, as opposed to connected to your inner expression or essence. Now, the lack of love is the reason why some of the most traumatic experiences take place, criminally or otherwise. Wars even on your planet have manifested from this vibration. You may look at the material implications of this, that wars are fought over religion or over monetary abundance. or abuse takes place at the hands of those who are narcissistic. But there's always an origination point for any density. And that origination point is lack of love. So what has happened is that lack of love and the experiences stemming from it have grown into a consciousness, a pool of energy that continues to perpetuate itself. It is woven itself into your DNA and archetypal patterns. It's woven itself into your collective experience, and it continues to manifest and strengthen through your consciousness. So again, we must confirm that much of this New World Order, although yes, we cannot deny it certainly is a real thing and happens on a daily basis, and there are many humans carrying out actions that are not in the highest intention for humanity, is still reinforced by your consciousness. So ability to love is something we want to define, because it is not often the way that humans perceive. Sometimes you believe that physical actions are what exchanges love. And yes, we agree that sometimes you are in such a state of service and abundance that it overflows and spills into the collective and does activate the feeling of love. But love could never be a feeling. Love is who you are. Love is what you were seated within, and it is your origination point. So unless that authentic love is found within for the self first, it doesn't have a logical expression upon the earth. And this is why many of the relationships that you've manifested in the third dimension have been more material focused or haven't truly fulfilled you, because you haven't found that anchor of authentic love within the self in order to mirror it outside of you. But this is changing. So the good news is the feminine aspects that you are bringing forward and exploring, and the spiritual revelations that you are coming to, are causing a shift whereby you are more focused within than ever before. And you are noticing where you are not honoring yourselves more than ever before. And this must force change. But it has to keep forward movement in order for what's been anchored here as a new world order to disintegrate. It is just as much on shaky ground as every other aspect of your government or human structure we've spoken of in this transmission. But what it truly requires is the upholding of the original frequency of love that only exists within you. This may sound selfish, but the honoring of the self is the first step in honoring all others and a return back to the earth that you desire.
The Council of Light started by talking about new structures in business and commerce. And I felt the disintegration of corporate America as far back as 15 years ago. I've had a number of experiences in business, often thinking that my timing was off. Probably preparing me for this time now. Is there any insight or guidance to those of us who are creating new business structures now?
Yes, we're the Pleiadians. It is a tricky time on your planet to create business when the old is falling apart, but yet at the same time, the new doesn't seem as if it's going in the right direction. And what you're here to navigate as business owners is a more conscious type of commerce that could never match the unconsciousness of an old system. And again, you are this free to explore these structures. The quantum aspect of where you are heading in the fifth dimension must come into this answer, because it is important to understand what a quantum experience is. We have talked at great length about the Mandela effect, for example, and how you are moving into a new time-space reality. But quantum time is a concept that many don't understand. It is something that is born within you. And as businesses have been focused on constructs of time and money. There's a new equation or balance that must be found. For the value of any employee or any transaction is something that is going to be completely different than it was before. Now, as we are stating this, we know that many of you are still in the midst of that transition and can't conceptualize of what we speak. For now, begin to look at everything that you are creating, business-wise or other, as having its anchor in service. This is a different way of perceiving business than it has been in the fifth dimension. Many of you were focused on material or some product or service, and that became the focal point for building a model. And that model was not necessarily wrong, but it doesn't apply anymore as you move into the fifth dimension. What all of you are providing is something that humanity needs, but could never look the same as anything or anyone else. And this is where we think new commerce and business will set itself apart from a structure that is going to have a very difficult time managing the third dimension and its requirements. Not because you're not complying so much as because what you're creating doesn't exist there anymore. And this has a lot to do with languaging and communication. It has a lot to do with what you open source, not meaning you have to give things away, but how you conceptualize what you're here to do. That is so incredibly important. We know that the guidelines that are coming out now for maintaining a business is actually putting it in a very disadvantageous position. But we want you to remember the consequences that exist are really only for those that comply. So if you're not complying to the consequences and you're not buying into an old structure that must supply anything to you that you need, you are truly free and creating in a different hologram where those consequences won't show up for you. And we validate this by saying that you all exist in different matrices and holograms. And sometimes what you believe to be true will draw and coincide with something else that implicates your path. So your ability to vision into the fifth dimension now and bring it into a new business model is what makes it so. It is that simple. But we want to allude to also quantum communication because we think the most tricky part of creating commerce at this time is navigating the different beliefs of society and how they're going to desire to operate. It is very important for businesses to communicate not what side of the fence they are on, because this is a current dilemma we see complicating the issue. Taking sides is like creating war. But for business to actually come in and communicate their corporate culture or mission in a way that draws those that match it is highly required. And then what you may find is perhaps those that weren't on the same path with you or your business have the room to consciously transition and interact with it in very free ways. We've brought the word freedom in many times as we've answered this question, and we will give that as the overarching answer to what you have asked. To see as freely as possible into the future and to create it in the way that best suits you and all others is what is most important. Anything put back into the old hierarchy is going to be affected by the changes that take place in that hierarchy. But the freedom to create outside and navigate that path to your choosing is the most beneficial and we would say prudent path for a business owner to take.
If life in heaven or the other dimensions are light and love, why do we choose to come here to go through this, and what is this all for?
This is Mary Magdalene. As a soul, you could never come to experience anything other than heaven on earth. It is just that the struggles that you face have been put into such a dense experience and light for you that it is seemingly separate of that heaven. Now, as a soul, knowing that you are going through tragedy and difficulty, It can be perceived in many lights. You are multidimensional. So although coming with a plan that may be coded to some disease perhaps, or to some loss of freedom, would only be present because it was so important for you to transmute. It's the transmutation of that brings you the bliss and joy and fulfillment that you desire, that is sometimes missing from a soul's experience. The relationship between your divine plan and what happens on the earth is very unknown. It is often coming by surprise, and it complicates your journey because it feels as if it robs you of happiness and fulfillment. But that happiness and fulfillment is something that is never stagnant. It may only be experienced and upgraded through intersecting with the opposite. The karmic experiences that you believe you are faced with are only a part of the ladder of ascension that all beings in the universe traverse. Even moving through the angelic realms does not come without considerations of discomfort. Sometimes a soul finds itself navigating different assignments and areas of angelic transition where souls who passed through that they are meant to support are some of the most traumatized and diseased. And they are leading them by the hand to see that what they were here to experience was a gift. The potential that you have to change whatever experience feels difficult to you right now is massive. It is just that you do not believe in that much potential. So that heaven on earth comes not from knowing what is coming next or controlling outcomes so that joy is all that you experience, but from accepting the seasons of your life as the only path of uncovering constant joy. And that in the contrast that you receive in any experience, you are now imprinting your life with a new possibility, a new potential. In every experience that is born of struggle, there is also one that is equally born of bliss. It is not because you are not spiritually evolved enough to experience the blissful ones, or that you must go through some specific amount of challenge or struggle for it to be uncovered. But often you're holding on to what is known, even in its dense and dark experience, because of its comfort. That doesn't allow you to move past what is shown in your current potentials. The rewiring of this truly comes from the faith and the knowing that everything that you need to receive in order to experience what you desire already exists, without having to know it or control it. This is the angelic path of a master that has traveled many timelines on the earth before. It sits still and it watches the events unfold. It feels into its present moment and expresses those feelings constructively and consciously. And then it waits. It waits for the signs and synchronicities to lead it forward. It knows there is a higher aspect of self that embodied with the part that is struggling. And it relies implicitly upon that higher aspect to navigate its experience. We know this sounds difficult in the situation you are in right now, but we are all here supporting you as well. As angelic teachers and masters, we are not void of challenge or experience, and this is why we have been recognized as such. This is why we come today to speak to you directly through this channel. You could only receive this message if you were an ascended master yourself. It is just that you are needing us to help you recognize that within through the reflective mirror of what is being offered.
I was just wondering if you could speak about the COVID-19 gift. What is being gifted to us through this experience?
Yes, we are the Arcturians. The term gift is an interesting one for us to use because it is so unique in how humans experience any gift. Sometimes the gift, although it is anticipated by the mind, will be completely different and even better when it arrives than what you believe. And that's what we most want to speak to in this experience, is that we see the potential outcomes of what you're walking through being far better than what you could even conceptualize at this moment. The gifts are many, but within you right now is a current purpose that you are each meant to receive that individual offering from. And our best advice is to be present with what is. In that presence, you are connecting to the quantum realm where all possibility lies, and where you may be directed to unknown gifts at a time that seems so restrictive and difficult. But also, we look at the new earth not necessarily as a gift so much as it is a reflection of the gift that you already are. This is truly where you're heading. It is like receiving a part of you that already exists, that is already known and desired, but now comes forward in a more collective way. And we want to relate to everything that we see manifesting on your planet as being more in a state of peace than you are used to as a human collective. We'll allude back to the love-based frequency that you were seated within, and the lack thereof in what you see in your current experience. Much of what has taken place in the outer world, especially in this experience you find yourself immersed within, has matched the vibration of fear. In all areas of your life, there has been some fear that has been the deciding factor for how you have created your life, whether it be the fear of not being able to take care of your family, the fear of not getting a degree and be hired at a certain job, the fear that you might get in a car accident and need some form of health insurance. Everything that you've created around you, although feeling quite safe within it, was manifested through fear. That fear vibration is clearing from the earth right now in mass. So even those who are suffering so much at this fearful time on the planet are relieving so much of that energy that it doesn't even relate to the timeline at hand. That's how important awakening is. It is not about knowing so much as it is about processing and coming back into some organic state of balance. So the fear vibration that we see in the collective, although targeted at or directed to a very specific experience, is actually coming from an entire lineage or even multiple lifetimes of similar patterns. So to move all of that out of the way actually ushers in a vibration of peace. And we see also that many of you in the midst of this very interesting time have found moments of peace. The energy that is surging through Gaia Sophia herself is assisting in this. Meditation, for example, connection with family members, connection with nature. And for some of you, rebirthing old parts of yourself that you had forgotten about or didn't have time for is bringing in states of peace and coherence. And this is where we see the new structures being anchored. And that is why it's always so important that we state reaching for times of peace during any transition or challenge lands the solutions that you desire. It also draws beneficial fragments of yourself from other timelines and ancient civilizations where peace was the norm. So imagine interacting with a supportive council of officers who are looking at the earth as if it was for all, reinstalling nature to its original and pure state, allowing space and time to explore your uniqueness and desires. This is a peaceful manifestation that will show up in all areas, physical and non-physical, and will be a consistent part of the new Earth experience.
I recently read, in a book that talked about us being programmed from birth, and the things that I've been hearing on the television, the new normal, and how we were programmed at what time to get up, to go to school, the time to go to lunch, and going home. And so that we'd be really good workers, to do the biddings of the people that we worked for, to go out. The question is, going on to the new world. Do you think people are going to wake up and realize that is not a new normal?
Yes, we're the Hathors, and we want to answer the first part of this question, knowing it's so important for humans to realize the way they are communicated with is a program, but also the way they communicate within themselves is equally as important. Much of what you have been subject to in the third dimension has created a pattern for you in all areas of your life, and this is what communication truly is. The original harmonics or sounds of human language are not the same as what they were created to be today. So the way that you communicate with yourselves, even beyond what's going on in this timeline, is so very important to bring back into a state of coherence and resonance. And we see quantum communication in the fifth dimension, finding that meeting point where all beings, regardless of their views, beliefs, races, may communicate together as one and find equilibrium. But at the same time, there are very specific words, phrases, acronyms, and even subliminal communication that has been put into a variety of different structures on your planet. And we want to take you back to the experience that was shared about government, or the transmission that was shared about government, and how there are many within your government that are carrying out actions that they do not realize are lower vibrational. And much of the reason for this is in their immersion in that consciousness, the communication they are surrounded by, the training, the vibrational interaction with technology, for example, is simulating a program within them where everything that they are here to do is filtered through the mind. And when the lives of humans, or the creation of your own life, is filtered through the mind, it leaves little room for empathy or the ability to use spiritual or emotional energies combined. The acronyms, especially, that you see formed about the virus are strengthening a frequency field that is interacted with daily. Every time it is interacted with, it is simulating a program and a response within your body. But we bring this to your attention because we know that many extra sensitive souls can feel that in the moment. And it's important to understand that you all have a unique response system that's built in, vibrationally and otherwise, to let you know when communication isn't genuine, or when it may be leading you astray. So there are some on the planet who may look at the phrase new normal and feel excited about that. And there are some on the planet who may interact with the phrase new normal and not feel so excited. They're both getting the same program, but picking up on the message a bit differently. And the difference between how a soul interacts with that communication and receives an impact from it has everything to do with consciousness. Your consciousness is a bandwidth of perception and can see beyond words. And we want to give everyone this challenge, for example. When you're staring at an acronym or a group of phrases or words together in a sentence, if you focus on it in a meditative state, not necessarily through the eyes, but even through your energy field or pineal, what you may begin to react to is the vibration within the acronym or the word. Some may see this as a sigil or a sacred geometry. Some may see the hidden messages within the words. Some may see numerologic patterns and programs, and others just may pick up on the feeling of it. This is very important for humanity to recognize, but to also follow, because within those combinations of words lies more than just one meaning, but also takes you into a vibrational state that often doesn't complement your desires and certain outcomes that you want to match. Now, we'll leave you with this. You've asked the question, will there be a normal? Is there a new normal? And we think you could never go back to the old experience that ever was. And we don't say that in a state of fear or to put you in some state of discouragement. As alluded to in the previous message, we believe you're going somewhere beyond your wildest dreams, but it will just take some time to get there. So what was normal before could never be normal again. And so many of you have experienced that individually in your own lives, becoming new visions of normal yourself that many do not perceive to be normal at all. Yet what you carry within you is the determining factor of how that arrives. So to express your uniqueness and individuality is a conscious tool for interacting with some strong signal that wants to suppress it. And as you continue to walk this path, that will be most necessary.
Could you conclude the session, please?
Yes. This is Mary Magdalene. We've been so pleased and honored to be with all of you today. And we shed within our deepest hearts upon you the greatest light of transition that your soul knows that it can walk. Because we see beyond the physical beings you believe yourselves to be. And we already see the forward movement of the angelic soul that you are. Many blessings. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you.